You got to kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you got to take it up a notch. There are a lot of rules.
Who are you? I'm Shiva, the god of death.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Being the one is just like being in love. No one can tell you you're in love, you just know it. Through and through. Balls to bones.
Seriously, you're totally elitist. You feel like the unappreciated scholars, so you shit on the people who know lesson. No, which is everybody. Yes.
Oi, listen up, you gits. It's Debaser. I'm Warlord Will, and I'm joined by me best git, Jared.
Hello.
On this show, we talk about new things, old and new. I probably fucked it up. I can't do this really well. We're going to talk about Warhammer, all in an effort to debase things that we know and ourselves.
So was that your best Roy Kent impression?
Oh, dude, what it's supposed to be. Actually, funny enough, in England, Europe rather, soccer is called football.
Across the pond,
yes,
if you will.
Across the pond. And orcs, when they were imagined in Warhammer, were supposed to be football hooligans.
Of course.
So,
that's a lot of things are clicking now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
with what little I know. About
you're gonna know a lot tonight.
I can't wait.
I'm sure you can't.
That's right. We're doing a deep dive on Warhammer today on Debaser.
Right. We're doing Warhammer.
Warhammer itself.
40k. A game that I love. I've been playing for 2 decades now because I turned 34 this year, and not shortly after being 14. I got into the game.
Yeah.
14 was a great year for me. I went to high school. I met new friends. I bought my first box of Fire Warriors, which are Tau. And
oh wow, they had Tau that long ago.
Yeah, actually,
nice.
You'll find out what year they were put in this.
I don't want to impose, but
okay.
I did buy a box of Space Marines when I was 11 or 12. I think I had you beat by a couple years.
Jared, fun fact. I was going to mention the AIM conversation that we had many years ago.
Oh my God.
Of me trying to recruit people to play this fucking game because, God, I was lonely. I had nobody to play this fucking game with me when I was 14. It was,
and you go to the store and it's like, what, a bunch of middle-aged guys? And you're like, I don't want to play this game.
No, it's not even that. My mom wouldn't fucking take me.
Oh, yeah.
So, sorry, Mom. So once again, as I said, please feel free to jump in, ask me questions at any time.
Okay.
I wrote 4 pages, hand wrote it yesterday. So I hope everybody enjoys this little ditty on a game that I love. So the company that made Warhammer 40k, Games Workshop, was founded in 1975 at 15 Bolingbroke Road by John Peake, Ian Livingstone, and Steve Jackson. Not the Steve Jackson that you're thinking about. Apparently, there's another video game Steve Jackson. I figured you would know who that is.
No, it's not ringing a bell.
Okay, well, good. So we don't worry about that. And I ripped all of this from fucking Wikipedia. So source Wikipedia.
All right.
Yeah. So fun thing. They started off by selling wooden board games.
Yeah.
So for like backgammon and chess. They did a bunch of
like the OG tabletop stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they didn't start off making models. They didn't start off making their own rule books for stuff.
Yeah.
It was simply just making game paraphernalia because they liked games. Mm-hmm. They were also able to import D&D from the States to England. So it was like they were, I guess, had the rights to do that at the time. And funnily enough, I want to say that Gygax and the other one, whose name I don't remember, did actually talk to Games Workshop about going all in on their own pen and paper game, but they ended up backing out from it. Anyways, they did eventually expand operations in the 90s to not just have their place in Nottingham. They moved from Road and moved to Nottingham in 97, but they got a U.S. Base of operations, which I believe was in Maryland. Mm-hmm. They expanded to Germany and one other place, but that's not important because who cares? Anyways, so some notable creations of that time were White Dwarf, a promotional magazine for gaming, which still runs to this day. you can actually get White Dwarf. White Dwarf is solely focused on Games Workshop products, but back in the day, it was kind of a grab bag of different gaming systems.
Okay.
Because I want to say it started in 1977. Another pillar of the GW model is Citadel Miniatures, a company that created metal models for tabletop games, and GW would eventually absorb that company, and they continue to make models to this day.
I know the name. Yeah, that one. I'm familiar
Citadel
with.
Miniatures, yeah. So they started off doing the metal and pewter models, and then at a certain point, Games Workshop was like they like co-founded Citadel. I guess it was like a third company that they invested in.
Yeah,
and then eventually they just absorbed it.
right.
In 1986, Tom Kirby became the general manager and would later become CEO, and refocused GW's purpose to expanding on Warhammer Fantasy and 40k. So they had, I guess, a couple other games they worked on, but his vision was, let's focus on just these two properties and expand it from there. Tom Kirby, he's actually the reason why there was a lot of issues with both game systems back in like 2006, 2007. He famously said, "We are not a game company. We are a models company that just so happens to sell rules for their models," which is hilarious because he was the CEO of Games Workshop. Anyways, so a story that keeps repeating itself. The refocus for both Fantasy and Warhammer 40k was towards a younger audience and a more family-friendly market, at a detriment to losing older fans. Now, that's something that since I've been playing this game for a really long time, have heard multiple times now. The sanitizing of the image of Warhammer to make it more kid-friendly or like Disney-ified. There was like people, a couple years ago saying, "Oh, well, Warhammer is really starting to lose the grimdark aesthetic that it has in order to, boost their sales and make it look like they can be purchased by like Disney." It's really fucking weird.
Just to sand off the edges of the franchise, as it were, and then to make it maybe even just more approachable for a mass audience too, because it doesn't help being a niche kind of property,
right,
where you have these rough edges and maybe your audience has like this certain, if not necessarily slant, but at least the impression of one. Right. You know what I mean?
So
we'll get into that.
Here's the fun thing. Like, so the example that always comes to mind is, so back in the 90s, before
back in the 90s,
Games Workshop sold metal demon models for the Chaos Marines, right? They could summon them into the thing, and they had demons for every single chaos god in the game, which we'll eventually elaborate on. But the god of excess used to be like the god of pleasure and pain, the Slanesh, and they had little demonettes as their like baseline troops. And the old metal demonettes were essentially like succubuses with 6 boobies that were exposed, right? But those were made when Tom Kirby was refocusing on a family-friendly market, right? So it blows my mind to think about that old fans were livid that there was a refocus, when I think about now, they replaced those old metal models with the boobies hanging out for plastic models that have no genitalia hanging out. And once again, I've heard they're just sanitizing it, and at one point when Warhammer Fantasy died and Age of Sigmar came out, the Slanesh god was missing. And people were like, "Oh, they're going to get rid of it. They're going to get rid of that god because, they can't have dongs in their war game that they're selling to little, 12-year-old Timmy." But that has since changed. It was just that they were refreshing the model line. Right. I'm sure in like 5 years, I'm going to hear the same fucking thing over and over again.
Of course. It happens. Yeah.
It's just really annoying. Anyways, the time period between 76 and the 2000s saw the rise of Rogue Trader, or otherwise known as first edition of 40k, and Warhammer Fantasy. Both of them were created by Rick Priestley. 5 editions of the Fantasy game would be released during this time period, and Rogue Trader would be traded in for Warhammer 40k, and at least 2 more editions would drop in 93 and 98. And we're not going to talk about Fantasy It's literally as what you think it is. People on horses and rank and flank.
It's
games.
like the Lord of the Rings era version of Warhammer, I guess.
Right before they actually purchased the
Well,
rights to Lord
right,
of the
because I was
Rings.
going to say they also do Lord of the Rings miniatures now, don't they?
It's kind of crazy. So they've been doing it since the Peter Jackson films came out.
Yeah.
And
Wow, they got right in there, didn't they?
oh yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And it's nuts because I had never seen that game played until I was like 27.
Wow.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that game played since then. Supposedly the next event that I go to, they're going to have. Yeah, so they got the Lord of the Rings license for the Lord of the Rings game. And it's it's something that I've not really seen too much. But now that I've been working events, it's kind of crazy that people will show up and be like, I need Elfagor of the Rivendell militia. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that is, man. Here's a box of characters. Go crazy.
Point him out to me, please. I'm sorry.
I'll have to look him up and the pictures don't help because none of the boxes have any pictures on them. It's really bad.
Yeah.
So anyways, so with second edition, which came out in 1993, we got the change in the setting that still permeates the game to this day. So the tagline for Warhammer 40k has always been, in the grim dark future of the 41st millennia, there's only war. And this came to be in second edition. Apparently, the first edition with Rogue Trader, you had 2 players that played the game, and then you actually had a game master that would, I guess, make things happen while the 2 players were playing against each other.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up another silly thing that has been lost to time during the change. So there was an Inquisitor, a person who goes and roots out evil chaos taint from human societies, named Obi-Wan Sherlock Clouseau. It's fucking stupid, right?
It's pretty on the nose.
So Rogue Trader, they stole a lot of stuff.
They just borrowed liberally from all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, it's the fun thing is apparently in Rogue Trader, the idea of humanity losing was kind of not rare, but there was hope in Rogue Trader. The humans could, if they last out long enough, they'll evolve into these latent psychic beings and they'll overcome evil, right? With second edition changing everything to a more grimdark aesthetic, it borrowed heavily from Dune. This is where a lot of the Dune stuff comes from, is apparently second edition.
And that, in as far meaning that humanity is a space-faring civilization that has bonded itself with technology in weird and maybe grotesque ways.
Yeah, and there's an emperor, and there's a holy crusade.
And there is, subsets of people that have developed or have been given psychic abilities even.
Yeah. There's
I think I'm more familiar with Warhammer than Dune at this point, though.
Bro, when I watched the Denis Villeneuve Dune, I'd never seen Dune before, and so watching it, I was like, "Oh my fucking god! I cannot believe how much they've stolen from this property. It's unreal." Anyways, so
borrowed.
Sorry, borrowed. Slightly changed.
Thanks, Frank Herbert.
Yeah. So the grimdark change was brought about by a man named Andy Chambers. Andy Chambers was with the company for a really long time. I want to say that he was head of the design studio. We have him to thank for a lot of the aesthetics that kind of influence how the game looks now. Some notable features of this edition were adding named characters, epic heroes, people like Marneus Calgar. You've seen Marneus Calgar. You've seen Tigurius. Of Abaddon.
Okay, the last 2 I know, yes.
Yeah, because of the fucking game that you've got me addicted to.
Are we going to have a sub?
Oh, we are going to talk about Tacticus at the very end
Beautiful.
of this.
Let's talk about our new addiction at the end here.
But so named characters were introduced in this, and same thing with army restrictions. The game, I guess, for Rogue Trader was very freeform. This one added restrictions, like you had to take a hero, an HQ and 2 troops before you could take anything else. You could only take X of one thing, yada yada, that kind of stuff.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. Yes, always ask questions.
So when it was Rogue Trader in the first edition,
yes,
that name to me implies that it wasn't always a war game.
It wasn't. Yeah, like I said, there was 2 players and a GM. So Rogue Traders in the universe are humans that live outside of human society.
Right.
They're kind of like space pirates. They don't have a problem with interacting and trading with other alien races, whereas the normal Imperium is very xenophobic.
Okay.
They don't like alien races.
They're cut off from...
Exactly. They find them impure and whatnot. So rogue traders kind of facilitate discussions between alien races and human races.
Right.
And whatnot.
But it was purely like in a transactional basis, sort of like a trade, I guess. Because that's when you called it Rogue Trader, I was like, oh, was it like a trading game and not like a war game?
No, it wasn't even a war game. It was a role-playing game, but two players had little dudes that they would fight against each other, and there was a GM that would like facilitate it. I don't know. It was really weird. It sounds like really esoteric.
You're right. Well, what was there an end goal for the players?
Yeah,
like,
one side winning. I guess there would be like an objective.
What were the win conditions? Yeah.
Possibly like stealing tech or, exiting a spaceship or, wiping out the other side. I'm sure it was like multiple different objectives in that game.
Whereas in Warhammer now, it's literally just survive.
No, there's objectives. Actually, the most recent version has the most, in my opinion, flavorful missions. But we'll get to 10th edition.
Okay.
Way in 2023. We're 20 years away from that. So I've never played 2nd edition, but I have heard stories of different crazy things that the game used to have. One of them being sustained hits dice. Apparently Terminators, which as these 10-foot tall,
like mechs,
but they're dudes inside of them.
Right. They're like a tank, but in the shape of a mech, maybe is how I describe it.
They're like so it's called tactical dreadnought armor.
Yeah.
Basically, they're wearing tank armor on their bodies, but it's fully articulated.
But it's bipedal too. Importantly, yeah. A Metal Gear, if you will.
A Metal Gear, but only 10 foot tall instead of 20 or 30. Yeah. A Terminator could spring an assault cannon, which is essentially a minigun, right? And sustained hits were when this thing's firing, you rolled a sustained hits dice and you get extra hits until you run out of ammo. And so you could sit there and be like, okay, I've got 6 hits. I've got 4 extra hits, 5 extra hits, yada, yada. You could just keep going on forever until you roll a 1 and you run out of ammo. So that was really silly. And also with Terminators, they were practically unkillable. When you dealt damage to them, normal people roll 1 dice to see if they fail an armor save. This Terminator would roll 2 dice and you had to roll double 1s for them to take damage, which is pretty unheard of. It's it's 8% chance. So like most of the time they could just shrug off damage. So that was some silly stuff. Some of the factions for 2nd edition were Space Marines of both flavors. So Imperial and Chaos. Imperial Guard, otherwise known as Astra Militarum. Now Eldar, Orcs, Tyranids, Demons, and Squats. Squats were essentially space dwarves. They were actually taken out of the game in the transition between 2nd edition and 3rd edition.
And they've recently been brought back, right?
Yeah, I do cover that.
Okay.
Yeah, they have been brought back.
I'm impressed with what little I know too.
No, that's good. So in 98, we got 3rd edition that saw the introduction of Dark Eldar, which are essentially, I should have said what Eldar are. Eldar are basically space elves.
Oh, I knew that, Will.
Yeah, I know you knew that, but the listeners probably don't know that.
No,
And so Dark Eldar are basically dark elves in space. The Necrons, which if you think of the T-1000, that's essentially what that army was. They even had a rule called "We'll be back."
And have they always had this like Egyptian kind of impression too? The
original models, the metal ones, did have like kind of a, how do I explain it? So there was an Egyptian faction in Warhammer Fantasy. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of them right now, but they were basically mummies.
Okay.
And so the Necrons were supposed to be the futuristic version of them. What if we had robotic mummies?
Right.
So when they transitioned from metal to plastic, they kept a little bit of the design cues, but it was more influenced by the Terminator robots instead of that. They have since
the actual like endoskeleton.
I don't know, but they're basically T-1000s in the and even they had a couple of models that had liquid metal as a rule, as a reference to.
Hold on, isn't the T-1000 the liquid?
Oh, is that the liquid one? Sorry, what is the?
Yeah, the T-1000 was Robert Patrick.
What is the normal Terminator?
So Arnold was Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
The Cyberdyne
T800.
The T800. Sorry, so the T800.
The Necrons look like the T800
yes.
Indoor skeleton. I forget what it's called. Anyway, the Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
But yeah, they literally had a rule called "We'll be back." It was fucking stupid.
Oh my god, that's great.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
But they also have like that. I've noticed in their designs they have a lot of like hieroglyphics and like pharaoh hood looking.
So that was a change that happened in 5th edition.
Oh, okay.
They had a range refresh.
Yeah.
They lost one unit called Pariahs, but they gained a lot of new stuff,
Right.
and the Egyptian aesthetic was kind of put back in.
Okay.
You'll see oftentimes when Games Workshop releases a new refresh of a range, they'll look back at some of the old stuff that they had and kind of incorporate it into the new stuff.
Okay.
That's very clever.
Yeah.
This is when Tau were introduced. They were introduced in 2003.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like right before you started.
Yeah, right
basically,
before I started. Demon Hunters, which were Grey Knights essentially, and the Witch Hunters, which were the Inquisition and Sisters of Battle. This would also be the time of the reboxing, changing of art, and updating model lines. This is when you see Karl Kopinski being one of the main artists. Oh, sorry. It's Karl Kopinski and Adrian Smith. If you know those artists, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The end of this edition saw the introduction of a global campaign called the 13th Black Crusade, and would have players participate on the events and influence the story. So the outcome would eventually inspire the fall of Cadia in 2017. And I have met at least one person whose custom chapter of Marines had participated in the event and had been canonized in the lore.
Nice.
So basically what this was is you could get this supplement called the 13th Black Crusade, and it had Abaddon holding Earth in his hand. It was on fire. It was really cool. And you would do battle, and then you would report your win or loss to either the store owner, or you would send in the results via email. And they would track it. Supposedly, the game ended in a stalemate where Chaos controlled Cadia, but they could not control space. Space was Imperial held. And so Games Workshop didn't feel comfortable moving along with the lore. They didn't want to say, okay, well, Cadia fell. Chaos wins or whatever. But because of all the events that happened in that campaign book, it did actually inspire a big change in the lore in 2017, which was the fall of Cadia. And even now, that stupid fucking game that we play has fall of Cadia as the thing. That was a big deal. Cadia is a planet that was kind of like a bastion of defense against the Eye of Terror, which is this, basically think of like a black hole, but instead of it sucking things in, it spit demons and shit out. And so, yeah, I know. And Cadia was a very famous regiment of Imperial Guardsmen, and you'll hear guard players say, "Oh, the planet broke before the guard did," kind of thing. It was a big shakeup. A lot of named characters died in that conflict. A lot of characters got brought back in that conflict. It was a neat little thing. So, at this point in 2004. That's when 4th edition dropped. This is when I got into the game. Sorry, I have fond memories of meeting up with buddies and playing on kitchen tables with paper towel rolls and boxes. I know that he doesn't listen because I haven't talked to him in a millennia, but Wilson, if you're listening to this, thank you for getting me into this fucking game, you piece of shit. I've lost so much money because of you. Yeah, so kind of to discuss how I got into the game before we move on. When I was in middle school, a kid that I knew named Leland Adams, he brought in his dad's Eldar Codex and Tyranid Codex. And codexes are essentially army books that also have the models and hobbying tips in them. And these were both the 3rd edition ones. And I remember like seeing the Tyranid models and being like, what is this? A Tyranid is essentially like a bug. You could think of like a xenomorph. A xenomorph's definitely inspired their look, or at least their look in the 3rd edition. Same thing with like Starship Troopers, lots of stabby bits.
To me, the easiest comparison is the Zerg in StarCraft.
Yes, yeah, very reminiscent of the Zerg, although which one came before the other, we don't really know, because there is, I don't know the story very well, but supposedly Blizzard approached Games Workshop to make a real-time strategy game on their fantasy thing, and Games Workshop was like, that's fucking stupid. And then, that's how we got Warcraft.
Yeah.
But anyways, seeing, because I knew a StarCraft at the time, and so seeing something like physical that I could touch blew my mind. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I remember going to Winter Haven High School, and my friend Wilson was like, hey, I bought some Necrons, I'm thinking of playing Warhammer, are you interested? And like, yeah, absolutely. So, I looked at the website and I decided to play Tau. And I just remember, meeting a couple other people at the high school who also played, and, going to their house and basically like playing on their kitchen table with some Coke cans and, bits and pieces here and there. Luckily, if I met somebody who'd been playing for a little bit longer, they actually had like actual plastic ruins to play in. It was a blast. I have like super nostalgia over all of that. This was like right after the 3 hurricanes hit.
Oh yeah.
It was like literally.
I was just thinking about that today.
Were you?
Because it's the anniversary of it.
Is it really?
This week.
Okay, so yeah. This week, next year, it'll be 20 years for me.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had so much time off from school during that.
I know, it was fucking nuts. Alien vs. Predator had just come out.
Oh, wow.
It was in theaters. So the 2000s also saw the Dawn of War games come out, which was an RTS game on the computer. And I know multiple people who got into the game because of Dawn of War.
Right.
This was like the first real big like outside push for Warhammer. God, Dawn of War was so... Did you ever play Dawn of War?
No, but... I knew of them because they were a big deal. It was by Relic Entertainment.
Relic, yeah.
And they made, didn't they make the Total War series?
No, Relic, that's...
Oh, shit.
Who does Total War? Because Total War is completely different. That's a Sega company. Relic was owned by THQ.
You're right.
And THQ went under.
You're right. It was. Yeah. You're right. Absolutely right on both accounts. But yeah, Dawn of War was a big franchise, and there were 2 or 3 of them, right?
There was Dawn of War, and then Winter Assault, and then Dark Crusade. And... I can't remember the last one, but it was an expansion for Sisters of Battle and Dark Eldar.
Cool.
And it was okay. The Dark Crusade was the best one. They had a planetary campaign. It had Tau in it. It had Necrons in it. Yeah, it was fucking awesome.
Yeah. And that was the heyday of like RTS games, honestly.
Yeah, it was. And it was a good game. It's it had a sequel. The sequel was not good. Oh, it wasn't that it was not good. It was just wasn't expansive as much, but it had Tyranids in it, which was really cool. Yeah. And then the third iteration of the game was awful. League of Legends definitely ruined.
That's right.
Yeah, because like it was like a very hero based. It was like, I don't want to play fucking heroes.
And that was the time.
Yeah.
When everything was becoming hero based because League was so big.
Yeah.
So when I was in middle school, I had some friends who played, but really it was like their brothers who played, like their older brothers.
Right.
And my buddy Nick Matarazzo, his older brother played. And he brought in some of his codexes, and they were Chaos Space Marines.
Oh, okay.
We were sitting there in school looking over them. Yeah.
It was the 3.5 one I'm willing to bet.
I guess. I couldn't
Dude, that codex?
It was like 2002 or 3.
Yeah, it's 3.5.
Okay.
Let me tell you, old head Chaos players still bitch that no codex for Chaos has come out that has been nearly as good as that one.
Oh, yeah.
That one had all of the options. It was awesome.
I tell you, I didn't know what any of it was like about, but those pictures were so cool.
They were.
And I'm like 11 or 12, and I'm already into like metal and like gothic stuff. Like I wore all black all the time. And I'm looking at this going, this is the coolest fucking... Like they made toys out of Slayer album covers. I'm into this. This is fucking awesome.
Yeah, man.
And I remember like asking my friends, like, what is this? And they're like, it's a game. You play it. And I was like with little toys? And they're like, yeah. And you buy them and you paint them and stuff. And I was like, it's so fucking cool. How have I not heard of this before? And I was like, where do you get them? I don't ever see these. And they're like, oh, you have to go to like hobby stores and like comic book shops. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I asked my dad to take me down to Downtown
Comics, baby.
Yep. And I was looking at them and was like, I think this is it. And it was like a box of Space Marines. And I remember my dad balking at the price. I don't remember what it was.
It was $30.
Oh, it had to have been like 20 or 30 easily.
It was $30.
And it was like five Marines, dudes. I think. Yeah.
And some paint, right?
Yeah, I think it came with paint. If I didn't buy them on top of it.
Yeah, it was the starter thing.
But I had like black, white, and red, and maybe silver or gold.
And some blue.
Yeah, I don't think I used the blue, but yeah.
But blue came with it.
Okay, yeah.
And like this really nasty, like bile green, right? It was for the base.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, goblin green is what it was called.
But yeah, and I bought it, took it home, and put them together and spray painted them, and then did the rest. And it did look great, but I had them forever, and they would just sit on my shelf. People would ask me, "What is this?" I'm like, "It's part of a tabletop game that I never really got into, but I really like the figures."
Yeah, man.
I was also familiar with Warhammer through video games, but like, and I didn't realize this at the time, but they go way further back because I had a fucking floppy disk ass game.
Yeah,
called
was it
Space Hulk?
Yeah, Space Hulk. So Space Hulk was I don't know when it was introduced, but it was Terminators versus a bunch of Gene Stealers in enclosed space. They still remake those games.
It's like a corridor shooter.
Yeah, we even had a giant, like a scaled up Space Hulk at Gen Con where we're using the McFarlane toys. To play it. Yeah, it was really neat. Space Hulk is like, it's classic.
Yeah.
They reboxed that in, I want to say 2007, where they made new Gene Stealers and made it like a big Brood Lord. It was really neat.
Like in tabletop form?
Yeah, they remade the whole thing.
Yeah,
it was really neat.
But yeah, I remember going through like my old games one day and seeing Space Hulk, and then I looked and it said Warhammer 40k, and I went, son of a bitch, that's that little tabletop game that I got some stuff from.
I want to say there was like Storm of Chaos was a fantasy game that was also like really old.
Yeah.
So actually the introduction of the Tau came with not just them, but also a book and a video game. And the video game came out around the same time as Halo.
Shit.
And had similar mechanics of the shield going down and then recharging, which was not a big thing in shooters, if I remember correctly, but they came out within like months of each other, so there's no way that one copied the other,
right?
But that game fucking is awful.
What's it called?
It's called Fire Warrior. It's really bad.
I think I know it. Okay,
dude, it's awful. If they decided to remake it, I'm sure like for a modern audience it would actually be really good, but as it stands, that game fucking sucks. It's really bad. But the book is good. I really like the book. Actually, funny, in 97, not just, with them making video games and whatnot, they also partnered with a card company to do a card game. There was a card game for Warhammer. Mm-hmm. It was not great, but the art was really cool. It wasn't in the codexes. Mm-hmm. And they created Black Library, which is the publishing company that does, different like stories and whatnot. Black Library has since become this like own monolithic thing.
Do they do all of the paperbacks that you see in the
Horus
stores?
Heresy ones.
Yeah, because there's so many Warhammer paperbacks. When you go into like the fantasy section of a bookstore, they'll have like a whole shelf of just Warhammer stuff.
Yeah,
and like I have an uncle that like has read so many of them.
Really,
and he's never even touched the figures.
There's a lot of people that like the lore and don't give a shit about the game or don't even know what the fuck, because like the price point to get in the game is kind of like,
well, that too. Yeah, and if you just want to read some like, I feel like those kinds of like fantasy war books are kind of like bodice rippers for like middle-aged men, if you will.
Yeah. Because they're very violent. They're incredibly violent.
Yeah.
All right. So to move on, 2008 saw the 5th edition of the game implemented. And this is the edition that I really started playing the game. Mm-hmm. I was 18. I could drive around. I had a car, I had a job, so I could actually buy stuff. This edition would be terrorized by the introduction, or at least the additional rules for Space Wolves, Blood Angels, Grey Knights, and would have Matt Ward's name wailed in Lamentations. Matt Ward was... So, let me back up. All of the codexes had a specific person that worked on them. Mm-hmm. And Matt Ward was introduced, like, he started writing some of these these army books in 2008. And if he touched your book, your lore would be god-awful, like really bad, poorly written, but your rules would be fucking wildly good. Everything that he touched would be absolutely busted in so many different ways. Actually, I want to say that him and Robin Krutich are the reason why the army books now don't have an authored by. It's the Games Workshop Design Studio.
So they don't become notorious or something.
Exactly.
Either,
yeah. I want to say Jess Goodwin. If you got one of his books, you were A-okay. He did a lot of the Eldar books. Eldar were always like really strong whenever he pinned for him. I liked his stuff. And also he was an artist too. He had a lot of he would work on the sketches that would later become the models. I really liked his stuff. This was also the addition of the Chapter House lawsuit, as well as the introduction of aircraft. So Chapter House, this was something that Games Workshop kind of stumbled into ass backward. In 5th edition, a lot of the books came with rules for units that did not have models. And so this company, Chapter House, thought, well, there is a demand, so let's supply it.
Yeah.
Capitalism demands that I take, one person's idea and make it my own. So they would sell conversion kits for things like Turvagons, which is a Tyranid unit, or they would make little add-ons for your Space Marine shoulders to make them look like they're in a specific chapter. And so Games Workshop sued them and kind of won. They made it to where if you do sell third-party Games Workshop stuff, you can't like use Games Workshop in your name,
right?
For whatever it is.
You can't explicitly name.
Yeah, it's got to be off-brand,
right?
But if Games Workshop put units in their books that did not have models, then there was nothing stopping anybody from making a third-party model for that unit
and like naming it as such, probably too, right? Okay,
yeah. So
it's interesting distinction,
dude. This had such a tremendous backlash on how things were implemented going forward.
Yeah,
this is the reason why we don't have the Imperial Guard anymore. We have the Astra Militarum because they can copyright that. Space Marines are we call them Space Marines, but they're actually the Adeptus Astartes,
right? Because you can't copyright Space Marines.
You can't
too
copyright
generic.
Space Marines. They tried.
Yeah,
they did try. That's why all of the paint, they have their own, Citadel puts out their paints and whatnot. They rebranded all of the colors into copyrightable names.
Right. They're very specific. They're cool names. But it's also for copyright purposes, right?
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
Eldar and Dark Eldar, that's not what they're called anymore. They're called Eldari and Drukari. It's fucking stupid. So like they made a bunch of copyrightable names, and it's dumb, but whatever.
Yeah.
We also lost a lot of those those units that did not have models. When the next codex would come out, they were gone.
They were like, wipe them from the fucking earth.
Nuked from orbit. Yeah. And
if we're not making money off of it, it don't fucking exist.
Basically, yeah. It was really unfortunate because like Tyranids had a lot of really neat stuff in their 5th edition codex that were lost in 6th edition. That have since actually come back. They've used what they've learned and brought those things back as new little units or nods to what used to be in the books. It's neat. But aircraft, the last thing there, aircraft were made in 5th edition, but they became absolute fucking nightmares in 6th edition, which is where we're at now. 2012 was where 6th edition rolled around, and known as the Cinematic Edition, this one saw armies with flying creatures and aircraft dominate early on, as well as psychic trees, warlord traits, and allies, and also one-on-one challenges were implemented. So back in the day, if you wanted a psychic power, you just had to pay for it. In this one, you gained access to a psychic tree, and you rolled to see what powers you would get. You couldn't just pick them. You would get random powers. And this game had a lot of randomness in it. Your warlord traits were random, so your leader dude would have like some weird trait that you could never rely on. Aircraft were hilariously hard to kill because if you did not have dedicated anti-air stuff, you could not take it out of the sky. It was very like the whole edition felt like a movie. When you killed something, the closest models had to be removed when you were shooting at units. When you got into close combat, your hero could challenge their hero to one-on-one combat, and if they chose not to do it, then the guy would have to slink to the back and he couldn't participate in the combat and whatnot. It was a way to snipe out characters. This edition also saw Imperial Knights get added to the game and was the first edition. I attended my first GT, which is a grand tournament. It was Crucible. It was like the second year that they did it. I was blown away. I had no idea that 60 fucking Warhammer players could show up to a place, a convention center, and fucking play Warhammer. It was really cool. 2 days worth. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Imperial Knights are giant robots. They're like 6 inches tall. They're huge. So it was a neat little implementation there. And the end of this edition saw formations added. Formations were, you paid extra points and you took specific units, but those units got extra rules. And that actually led to a lot of teeth gnashing in the next edition, which came about in 2014. 7th edition, sometimes known as 6.5. More formations and more psychic abilities were added, and more cinematic rules were also added to this edition. A lot of people hated this edition, but personally, I loved it, partially because the army that I played was absolutely fucking busted.
Oh, yeah.
I got to play all the units that I liked, and I fucking loved it.
Tau, you mean, right?
Yeah, Tau.
Okay.
I got to bring... So there's
We
these
have
things,
to talk about the Tau. You can't skip the Tau.
You can't skip Tau.
You listening, Brian?
Warhammer. Anyways, Riptides were like these 4-inch tall fucking Gundams, and they were really obnoxious to try and kill, and I could bring 4 of them. It was fucking stupid. It was so dumb, man. I love 7th edition. AdMech and Genestealer Cult were added to the game during this edition, as well as narrative campaigns, which were like they did these things where they would add more formations to the game, specifically to armies that were in these campaign books, and they're all like major conflicts to try to push the narrative forward. And one of them was obviously the fall of Cadia, which happened in 2017. And this was the first time in like 15 years where we finally got FAQs, or frequently asked questions, answered by Games Workshop.
Wow.
So remember how I talked about Tom Kirby?
Yeah.
Just saying whatever.
You weren't a fan. And he was outspoken against his own brand a little bit, it sounded like.
Yes. So for the longest time, they didn't acknowledge the people who played the game. There would be, these books would come out, and because the English language is like really abusable, you would have these instances where you have no idea what's happening. Like, does this work the way that I think it's supposed to work? There were no balance passes either. There was basically nothing. And
so people could find like exploits because of the language and the rules.
Exactly.
Okay.
And because we didn't have FAQs, they kind of stopped, I want to say, in 4th edition or like in between 5th and 6th edition. But we went quite a while without any kind of word from the studio.
Right.
So much so that an independent company called Frontline Gaming, who created the independent tournament circuit, would do their own FAQs. So, and they tried to make it a democracy. People could vote on changes, how they interpret the rules. Okay. And so if you went to an ITC event, ITC FAQs were in effect, and you needed to know what exactly was going on, because it drastically changed the game for the better, in my opinion. Some people didn't like that, but it's better than nothing.
Exactly, because you need, everyone has to adhere to an agreed upon a set of rules and regulations. Because like those codex books aren't exactly giving you every
they don't
letter,
give you
of the law, essentially. And, I like, so at these tournaments too, are there like judges or referees essentially that are there to help interpret the rules for you, or to say like, okay, what you're trying to do is wrong, you can't do this kind of stuff? Okay.
Yeah. And so the ITC FAQs would help with that. But in 2017, they finally started, Games Workshop started, they kind
of brought it in-house and made their own brand
so
of this.
They created a bunch of Facebook accounts, one for 40k, one for fantasy, or I think it was Age of Sigmar at the time, because they had blown up fantasy at that point in time. And then one that was just GW proper. And everybody would wait and bated breath for these FAQs, because it was like, finally. And then this edition, before it closed out, saw the return of 2 Primarchs. Primarchs are essentially these demigods of specific factions, and one was Magnus, who's the Primarch of the Thousand Sons, I think Egyptian themed Space Marines, and one was Guilliman, who was the Primarch of the Ultramarines, which are the poster boys of Games Workshop's flagship 40k.
Right. Yeah.
2017 saw the fall of Cadia and the rise of 8th edition, which was a complete rehaul of the entire game. Basically, they got rid of, there was essentially this like rule of 7 strength versus toughness table that you had to look at in order to figure out how you're able to hurt the guy across the table. In this situation, they simplified it. If it was underneath their toughness, you needed a 5 to win them. If it was equal to their toughness, you needed a 4. If it's over their toughness, you need a 3. If it's double their toughness, you need a 2. If it's half of their toughness, you need a 6. Real easy. Tanks got simplified. They used to have like armor facing, like the front armor used to be stronger than the side armor and the back armor. And all the guns, wherever they were firing from, the gun had to have line of sight to whatever it was shooting at. So sometimes you'd have one gun on one side shooting at something and a gun on the other side shooting at something completely different. Now it didn't matter. If, your antenna saw a dude, you can shoot all your guns at that guy. And then they added like more wounds, more toughness. They changed the way damage is done. The game was completely different. And honestly, once you got used to it, it was pretty good. The beginning of 8th edition was kind of like Wild Wild West though.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was kind of crazy, but because Games Workshop was trying to be more proactive, you would see FAQs come out quickly. They implemented the system where every 4 months they would do a balance pass and see what was wrong with the game and try to, tone down some of the stronger armies and beef up some of the weaker armies. They also got rid of templates. There used to be like blast templates and flamer templates. Those were gone. They changed the way that those weapons worked, and honestly for the better, because nothing was worse than rolling a scatter dice and moving your template over and arguing with the guy across the table. Well, it's you're kind of off the angle here, and it's actually not getting that. It got rid of all that. That was so fucking booty right there. Mortarion, another Primarch. This one time for the Death Guard. He was also brought back for the game, which is a big deal. And many classic characters were reimagined as Primaris Marines. Primaris Marines were basically Games Workshop trying to make their poster boy units more true scale, larger, beefier, scarier. And so a lot of the old characters like Marnius Calgar and Kavan Shrike, they all got beefed up and reimagined, sometimes for the better and sometimes not for the better. And the Sisters of Battle, which originally were the Witch Hunters, they finally got an army refresh after 20 years. That army used to be in metal. You could only get it in metal, and you could only use that shitty-ass Witch Hunters Codex from 3rd edition for many editions after the fact.
Yeah.
But they're finally in plastic, and they look beautiful. So 2020 brought with it COVID and 9th edition, largely the same as 8th edition mechanically, but with some significant changes. This edition saw a range refresh for some Eldar units, also for Astra Militarum and Black Templars. They got, a lot of their stuff got upscaled to be Primaris. Also, the Squats, who had largely been gone from the game, came back as the Votan, Space Dwarves.
Those are the dwarves guys.
Those are the dwarf guys, yeah. This was also the edition where we saw the return of Games Workshop events. And that started in 2021, the first time since the 90s.
So they decided during COVID was the best.
Yes. Do you know where the first event was held?
Tampa, Florida.
Orlando, Florida.
Oh, God.
I went to it.
Yeah.
It was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I placed top 16.
Yeah.
It was a great time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Games Workshop did do events back in the 90s. They're called Rogue Trader events. Go figure. RTT is still used to this day for small one-day tournaments.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the first time in a very long time that they came back with trying to, re-ingratiate themselves with the community and put on events, give out prize support. And this is the exact same events that I work for today.
All right.
So good stuff there. And finally, we're in 2023. We have the start of 10th edition. Just came out, I think, 2 months ago. Has many quality of life updates to the game involving, ways to get cover saves, a hard reset for every single army. So everybody started at a baseline, although some of the books are much better than the other ones. And we get our first 2 codexes, I want to say next month, and the future looks bright.
All right. Who are the upcoming codexes? Do you know?
Space Marines and Tyranids.
Are you allowed to say?
Yeah.
Are those those are the first 2, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that's what it launched with, was like that starter box was Space Marines and Tyranids.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. That's like the big push is Marines are fighting Nids on a part of the galactic map that usually doesn't see any kind of conflict.
Right.
Yeah. It's cool. I love the redesign for the Nids.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. We're getting previews at Nova next week. But yeah, it's a very well-known thing that those books are coming out sometime in September. I just don't know when in September and what's coming with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you have any questions?
I do have a lot.
All right, let's hear it.
What? There's got to be like a cottage industry based around what Warhammer players put their figures into when they lug them between games.
There is.
What is it? I haven't seen it.
I want to say you're talking about the cases, army cases.
Right, cases, backpacks, like
I want to say that
luggage, what is it?
one of them is called army case or
And
something like that.
So what does it look like? Do they have like, is it like styrofoam with like little cutouts for
Yes,
models?
that's exactly what it is.
Is it literally that?
Although there are fancier cases that have magnetic sheets, and you put magnets on your bases,
that's
and it
such a
has
good
a
idea.
glass thing so you can see, everybody can see your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really cool. I want one eventually.
Yeah.
They're expensive.
I bet.
They're fucking
I bet.
expensive.
Because I was like, there's got to be, like, what do people use other than just tossing them in a box?
That's
like
what I
I've
do.
seen you do.
That's-
I know. I
do that. I treat myself
move
like
it.
I treat myself like shit. Let's be real. I wasn't a very good painter until COVID happened, so like I'm still have like really bad habits.
Yeah.
It is what it is, man.
Yeah,
It's my
yeah.
stuff. I treat my clients' stuff much better than
Yeah.
how I do now.
I've seen you pack the stuff you paint when you're doing it for other people, and you're very delicate with it. But when it's your own stuff, it just gets tossed in a box.
It's true. It's true.
I'm gonna have to look up photos of these because I want to see like what they
Yeah,
look
it's
like.
like
I'm fascinated
army
by that.
case or some shit.
Yeah.
No, they're neat. I have one in my garage. I just don't have the styrofoam for it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little peripheral shit for
Oh.
this game.
For any hobby
It's true.
that exists. But
Yeah.
yeah, because like I know for card games, you can
You got
buy
little
like
deck boxes.
even the little slip cases.
Yeah.
And all kinds of deck boxes.
Mhm.
So here's a topic I want to get into.
Okay, let's see it.
Outside of what we're going to talk about later,
Yeah.
what are some of the best Warhammer games? Because I've played a handful.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, oh Jesus. Okay. Dawn of War. 100%.
Right.
The first couple of Dawn of Wars,
RTS.
specifically Dark Crusade. If you want a good afternoon killer, Dark Crusade is the shit.
Is it still on Steam?
I don't know. That's
It
a good
probably
question.
is.
Yeah, it's probably like $10.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic game.
I think they're on GOG too. Good old games.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That's a really good one. The first Space Marine game with Captain Titus is fucking awesome.
Is that the PS3?
Yeah, yes. and
Okay,
the
that
Xbox
one I beat.
360
I
one,
played
yeah.
it all the way through. Yeah, it was that era.
Yeah.
And that one was really good. It's a third-person
Action
shooter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's right on my alley because I love those kinds of games.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun with it. It was really good.
The game is so good.
Warhammer is such a fascinating property to adapt into video games because it can be every genre.
Yeah.
Like you have they were RTS and first-person shooters, but
Mm-hmm.
now you've also got your third-person shooters. Is Blood Bowl technically Warhammer?
Yeah. Blood Bowl is it's Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
But instead of them solving problems through conflict, they found an NFL league guide, came, from wherever, landed in the fantasy thing, and they all read it and was like, oh yeah, this is the NIFL.
Oh my God.
And we solve all our problems with Blood Bowl.
That's awesome. They call it NIFL because
The
that's what
NIFL.
they think NFL
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Apparently
That
the game's
rules.
really fun. I don't know.
No, I know. There's a huge following on Steam
Yeah,
to
Blood
this
Bowl
day.
2 was good.
Yeah.
The first
yeah.
Blood Bowl was not good. It was way too
Oh.
crunchy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the second one, they streamlined it a lot, and it's apparently really good.
I hear about it all the time. But yeah, and for those of you listening, it's basically just like a more violent version of football, but with orcs.
What was that? It was an early 90s football game where you
Blitz?
could blitz.
NFL Blitz.
It's NFL Blitz, but you can kill your opponents.
Oh, in Blood Bowl.
In Blood Bowl.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you can't kill in Blitz, but
No.
you could come pretty
Really
close.
close, yeah.
Especially in the later ones. Like there was one for the PS3.
You could like DDT people.
Well, you could do steroids and stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like you could pay a doctor to come in and like shoot up your players and stuff. And then you could also like sabotage the other team by like, hey, do you want to like pay a guy and go over there and like break the quarterback's legs, before the next game?
That's amazing.
It was crazy shit in that last game.
I love that.
But I love the N64 ones. They were so fun.
Those were super fun. But yeah, like there was a Vermintide. Vermintide 2 was
Yeah.
really good. Fat shit.
That's
Fat
right.
Shark.
Those were first-person shooters that were like also team-based,
They
right?
were
Is
team
that-
based, and
yeah.
you killed zombies and
Yeah, you just would
chaos
fight
people.
hordes.
Yeah.
And then there was Darktide.
Darktide that came out. They're apparently rebranding to be more RPG.
They keep
Really in
trying to
October.
fix that game, it sounds like. So
It was fun. When we played it, it was really fun.
I had fun, but it was
Yeah.
broken.
Here's the thing about like Warhammer games, right? After Relic and THQ went under,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, Games Workshop was like, yeah, we'll give our IP to literally anybody. Who fucking cares?
They must have been real cheap with the license, I think.
Yeah, they were. And like it just had to look like Warhammer and it didn't
Right.
have to be good, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But recently, like every so often you'll get like a gem, and recently a lot of the games that have been coming out have been actually good. Like I know Dark Tide is kind of busted, but it looks beautiful and it's actually really fun to play.
It has promise.
Yeah. Space Marine 2 comes out later this year, and like Jared, you have no idea how excited I am for that game. It's going to be fucking awesome. And you can play with 2 other people if you're on the same console. It's fucking cool, man. The damn Bolt Gun game, the Doom reskin.
Thank you, Bolt Gun.
Yeah, it's $20 and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I spent 16 hours on that game.
Yeah.
Super fun.
And it's a boomer shooter,
It's a
right?
boomer
Like
shooter.
It's essentially Doom, but with like Warhammer.
It's like
reskin.
what if Doom came out, but instead of being the Doom guy, you're just a fucking Space Marine. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that game. There's Chaos Gate. Chaos Gate came out recently. It's like XCOM.
That's right.
But it's Grey Knights, and they recently added Assassins. It's apparently really good.
Yeah.
Rogue Trader comes out later this year, and that's by the studio that did the Pathfinder RPG game. So Rogue Trader, you play as a Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
But it's like based on the pen and paper game Rogue Trader, and you're a dude and you have like a space wolf and a sister and an astropath and a Eldar Pathfinder, and you're going into the dark city of Kamara, which is where the Dark Eldar live, and it looks good. I'm so chock full of fucking video games on the last end of this damn year. Well, because I've got Armored Core in a week, and then I've got Baldur's Gate whenever I'm done with Armored Core, and then Rogue Trader after that, and then finally Space Marine. So like I've got 4 fucking games coming up. I'm really excited though.
Yeah, October alone has a bunch coming out too that I'm like, I might have to wait till after next year to touch any of these.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, man, Warhammer has been a big part of my life, and it's just so funny to think about where I was when I was 13, 14 years old and trying to get into the game, and my mom like being completely adverse to going to Coliseum Comics. I'm not even, or Downtown Comics in Winter Haven. And like, not wanting to ever spend any kind of money on any of this stuff. But like this game has kept me off of drugs, I can't afford them.
Right. I think I saw an Instagram video a long time ago that was like, to the guy that introduced me to Warhammer, why didn't you introduce me to crack instead? And he's like walking through his house showing all of his armies.
Stuff, it's made me a more creative person, and it's gotten me my last 2 jobs. I met my last job of 7 years. I met my boss at a fucking tournament. Yeah. And we became really good buddies. And one day I was like, hey, I'm looking to get into logistics. What does that entail? And he's like, don't worry about it. I got you a job. Yeah. Train me to replace him. Yeah. And then me working for Games Workshop was facilitated by me just being in the community for so many years, and not to pat myself on the back, but being a good person, an amicable person that people enjoy being around. To help getting me to where I am. And I love it. I don't want to change anything about it, man. I fucking, well, the pay could be better, but I mean, like, I know everybody took a pay cut working for the events team to do it, and it's fucking great, man.
Also, it doesn't have Warhammer in the name, but there was that first-person shooter that looked really interesting, but it was apparently super broken.
Oh, the Necromunda one.
Necromunda. Yeah. That was it. That game looked sick as hell. Yeah, and it's set in Warhammer.
Yeah, so Necromunda is a side game. It's like Necromunda is a hive city, and so to describe what a hive city is, it is a city on a city on a city on a city on a city, just stacking all the way up, where the aristocracy is all the way at the top. Wow. Yeah. It's basically a planet where it's all New York, but New York 5 times high.
They just keep building on top of itself.
So there's a lot of like human gangs that control turf in Necromunda, and it's all just basically gang warfare, although you could play the police. There's what, I can't remember what they're called now, but they used to be called the Adeptus Arbites, and they were modeled after Judge Dredd. There's so many different other games that they have, like peripheral games like Necromunda, which they just recently relaunched. Necromunda was a game that was out in the 90s that they just never supported.
Like the tabletop version.
The tabletop version of it, yeah. Same thing with, there was a fantasy version of it, Mordheim. And I'm sure that...
I know that name.
Yeah, because there was a Steam game for it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it's going to come back eventually.
Yeah.
Epic was a small-scaled version of Warhammer. Like, you know how you have like a model and it's a Space Marine?
Yeah.
Well, this model would be like a base with 10 itty-bitty Space Marines, and then like a giant Titan.
Yeah.
It was like large scale Warhammer, but on a tiny little models, and they're bringing that back as Titanicus.
Cool.
There was Aeronautica Imperialis, which was a fucking plane game. Apparently, the Brits love plane games.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that they got rid of and they're now bringing back because there is a demand for it. Same thing with like Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl didn't get supported after the 90s, and they've recently relaunched it, and they're trying to regain their lost fans.
Do you want to dive into Tacticus?
Yeah, so to close out the show, what was it? I was flying out to Gen Con.
Yeah, you were going to Gen Con.
And you out of the blue, because what was it? Because guys were gonna do they were gonna cover. It wasn't even that.
I kept getting ads on like Instagram.
For Tacticus, that's right.
For this mobile game called Warhammer 40k Tacticus.
Yeah,
and the ads were like kind of cool, and I was like, yeah, maybe this would be like a good intro to Warhammer, because like you've always been super into Warhammer, and I know like just so little. Like anything I know about it, I've gleaned from you or like a couple of video games,
right?
And I was like, maybe this would be a good introduction for me. And it's like a dumb thing I can click around on my phone with.
Yeah. And you hit me up. You're like, hey, is this game good? I'm like, dude, I avoid phone games like the fucking plague.
And for good reason.
Yeah.
For good reason. Because a lot of them are so scammy and like just shitty and manipulative.
Yes. Which this game absolutely is.
100% is. Because like we have friends that play the
Arc Knights, or not Arc Knights, Genshin Impact.
And Genshin Impact.
Yeah.
Genshin's a big one. And then there's like a new one, Honk Star Rail.
Honkai.
Stupid name. Anyway. But they're all like
Tacticus isn't much better. It's not. Shit ass faux Latin.
I won't defend it.
Okay.
It wants my money. Like I think the first time I explained it to you, I was like, I can tell this game wants my wallet.
Yeah.
Like it's clearly designed around me paying.
Yes.
But your first 6 hours, depending on how much you are really getting into
it's
it. It's
incredibly addictive.
Oh yeah. It's just throwing shit at you. And you're just like, yeah. And you don't want to look away from it.
Yes.
And you're just like plowing through missions and like having so much fun and like unlocking dudes and getting drops unlocked. And you're just like seeing all kinds of fun, exciting, bright things are happening.
Yeah, and then you hit a fucking wall.
And then you hit a wall hard. Yeah. And then you're just doing your dailies. Yeah. But it's fun.
It is actually fun.
And I'm learning a lot about Warhammer at large.
Yeah.
And
I posted some of my work, and you're like, I instantly knew those were from Necrons. Yes. Because like the second faction that you fucking...
Yeah, because I know what their aesthetics are now.
Yeah.
And it's actually like a decent little strategy game, because I guess the easiest comparison I can think of is like Final Fantasy Tactics.
This is exactly
because it's like a hex based.
Yeah, it has elevation and stuff. Yeah,
right. And there's like some neat, strategies you can think of, like with your little guys dudes, and their abilities and stuff. It's neat. I like it a lot.
It's super fun.
We were just nerding out before we started recording about like who we have unlocked and like how far we are and stuff. It's a fun little game. If it's just a daily thing where I'm putting maybe 30 minutes into it in my downtime, that's fun. That's what I want.
I'm putting like 3 hours into this every single
I can see
game.
it. Yeah, being at home. Yeah.
A, so much fun. B, it's got the skin of the game that I love.
Right.
C, I've got a lot of downtime with this fucking child of mine.
Yeah.
So.
And if you want to look us up, we'll give you I think we have referral codes that we could give out that both of us will get in-game currency.
Please play the game.
This whole episode has been an elaborate attempt for us to desperately earn some currency in the game. We're recruiting people into our multi-level marketing Warhammer scheme.
Look, if you don't want anime waifus and instead want big nasty green boys,
that's what you want.
This is the game for you. Yeah. Do you want to come back and cover for
of Warhammer?
Yeah.
This is part 1 of question mark.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. We will do more. There is so much more to talk about.
There's a ton.
Yeah.
A shit ton. It's fucking unreal.
Yeah.
And like, you know how you're saying like the IP can go into literally any kind of game?
Yeah.
Their IP can go into literally any kind of TV show.
Yeah.
It can do
property.
It can do anything you want it to do.
Yeah.
Because they stole or borrowed whatever from so many different properties.
Yeah.
And changed it just enough to make it its own thing. You can literally do anything and everything with this IP, and I love it.
And you barely even touched on what all the factions are. Like we talked a little bit about like 3 or 4, but there's like
there's like 23.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there's so many characters within each one, but they each have their own aesthetics and like it's great.
It's great.
It's so much stuff to get into.
Yeah,
but so I think that's been part 1
of question mark. Hell yeah.
Well, folks, thank you for listening. You can find our show on social media by searching for @DebaserPod. I'm Jared Rusk, and you can find me on Twitter @JaredSRusk or on Instagram @solid_slack. Will, where can people find you, and what would you like to plug?
People can find me at pocket_infinity on Instagram, and also I'd like to plug this show. Please listen to the show. Please don't tune out because of this episode. If there's a significant drop, Jared will literally never let me talk about Warhammer ever again. And
if we get like one listen, I'm going to be like, listen, we can't do Warhammer again. Absolutely.
Dude, I'm about to shill the fuck out of this thing, by the way.
Alienated our listeners. No, I think if anything, we might have more because like Warhammer people that you could turn on to this episode.
I have a huge community.
They're like, I don't like movies, but I do like Warhammer.
Yeah, there you go. It's like one of X. So thank you for listening, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Debaser is hosted by Will Taylor and Jared Rusk, with production by Jared Rusk. Want to email the show? Send it to podcast@debaserpod.com. Want to help us out? Please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice, especially Apple Podcasts. And please tell a friend to listen to Debaser. Thank you for listening, and take care out there.